Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Me Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday night class on Swami Ranganathananda's splendid little book, Divine Grace. And Swayam, where are we? What page are we on, and where are we starting?
Yes, Brother Shankara, and thanks to Haima, she helped me remember. We are on page 30, um, 30,
Okay.
and the beginning is actually part of the previous page where Swamiji is, I think, explaining the two birds story. So, shall I begin with page 29 from?
As pleases yourself, dear.
Okay,
Please.
I think that might give it some continuity. Okay. Swami Vivekananda says in his lecture on Vedanta and its application to Indian life, which is in the complete works, this is the picture of the human soul. Man is eating the sweet and bitter fruits of this life, pursuing gold, pursuing his senses, pursuing the vanities of life. Hopelessly, madly, careering he goes. In other places, the Upanishads have compared the human soul to the charioteer and the senses to the mad horses unrestrained. Such is the career of men pursuing the vanities of life. Children dreaming golden dreams, only to find that they are but vain, and old men chewing the cud of their past deeds, and yet not knowing how to get out of this network. This is the world. Yet, in the life of everyone, there come golden moments. In the midst of the deepest sorrows, nay, of the deepest joys, there come moments when a part of the cloud that hides the sunlight moves away as it were, and we catch a glimpse, in spite of ourselves, of something beyond, away, away beyond the life of the senses, away, away beyond its vanities, its joys and its sorrows, away, away beyond nature, or our imaginations of happiness here or hereafter, away beyond all thirst for gold, or for fame, or for name, or for posterity. Man stops for a moment at this glimpse and sees the other bird, calm and majestic, eating neither sweet nor bitter fruits, but immersed in his own glory, self content, self satisfied. As the Gita says, he, he whose devotion is to the Atman, he who does not want anything beyond the Atman, he who has become satisfied in the Atman, what work is there for him to do? Why should he drudge? Man catches a glimpse, then again forgets and goes on eating the sweet and bitter fruits of life. Perhaps after a time he catches another glimpse, and the lower bird goes nearer and nearer to the higher bird as blows after blows are received. If he be fortunate to receive hard knocks, then he comes nearer and nearer to his companion, the other bird, his life, his friend, and as he approaches him, he finds that the light from the higher bird is playing around his own plumage, and as he comes nearer and nearer, lo, the transformation is going on. The nearer and nearer he comes, he finds himself melting away, as it were, until he has entirely disappeared. He did not really exist. It was but the reflection of the other bird, who was there calm and majestic amidst the moving leaves. It was all his glory, the upper bird's. He then becomes fearless, perfectly satisfied, calmly serene. All this becomes highlighted towards the end of the Gita when Sri Krishna says, "Till now I told you the profound truths of the science of religion. Now I tell you the profoundest truth, and it is this: having achieved all the strength of manliness, now rise to the higher and final level of godliness, full saintliness, by surrendering the ego and all its powers and propensities to me, who am your own infinite self. Don't leave anything out to claim as exclusively your own." When the separate I goes away completely, everything becomes God and nothing else remains. That is self surrender, resignation to God, which is the same as the grace of the divine. The grace descends fully at that stage from the blessed Lord into the heart of the seeker. As I said at the beginning, this is the last word of religion, complete surrender. When the devotee fully experiences being bathed in divine grace and looking back at one's past life, the devotee finds that it was that very grace that was operating all the time at the earlier stages of Purushkara also. The experience of divine grace gives a new type of strength to man, namely, the strength to digest all experiences and to become the stronger through that digestion, morally and spiritually. As digested food increases physical strength, digested knowledge and information increases mental and intellectual strength, and the lack of such digestion increases the toxic elements of the body and mind, leading to physical and mental diseases. So also digested experiences, success or failure, happiness or unhappiness, gain or loss, increase the character strength in men and women, and lack of such spiritual digestion distorts his or her character and the interhuman situation. Such spiritual digestion is the product of man's contact within himself, man's contact with the divine within himself or herself. In one of its many beautiful verses, Srimad Bhagavatam reveals this sweet character fruit of divine grace. Shall we stop there, Brother Shankara, to discuss?
Dear, if you feel like it's the appropriate place to stop, and there's something that you would like to add or ask from your own self, that's fine. Uh, it just seemed like it was flowing along so nicely.
Okay.
And the Swami was explaining things so well that I just decided not to interrupt at all. There were, this digestion that the Swami talks about. This is what Sri Ramakrishna meant when people would come to him and they would have their very fine intellectual knowledge, their knowledge of the scriptures, their knowledge of spiritual practices and so on. But they weren't doing that much. It was all something of the mind. And he would say to them, yes, but you must assimilate this. This is wonderful that you know this, but you must assimilate it. And assimilate means to digest, to take it into yourself. I mean, it's one thing to have the Shravana and even memorize. He had devotees who had memorized the entire Gita and yet never took the actions that Sri Krishna recommends in chapters 5 and 6, which is just mentioned here, offer everything to me. This other that he was discussing is in chapter 13, the field and its knower, the profoundest truth, he says, that you are the field of action. Your lower self is the field of action. And whose field of action? It seems to be yours as this separate self, but not really at all. It is me as the knower who is creating and doing all of this action. And so this is the great assimilation or digestion that the Swami is talking about here. So any comments or questions from anyone?
I just wanted to take a moment to digest the digestion.
Okay, please.
It's about digestion.
What particular thing strikes you as interesting, Swayam?
Um, just the analogy between the importance of digesting the food for physical well-being. I mean, if we have a upset stomach, a viral infection, or whatever, it doesn't feel that good. We suffer from the negative effects. Likewise, if we don't take the time to digest the spiritual food, I suppose that similarly we will not only not get the benefit, but have discomfort of some
Well,
kind.
it becomes toxic, just as food undigested in the system, in our system, becomes toxic, and we have indigestion or malnourishment. The same thing happens with undigested spiritual. It turns to vanity. It turns to spiritual pride. And this is what Swami Prabhavananda said is the very most dangerous of the obstacles, is when we clothe ourselves in the upadi, the limitation, the idea, when we clothe ourselves in the idea that because I know all these things, I have achieved. And furthermore, I am superior to those who remain ignorant. And we've all met those people. And he says it's supremely dangerous because it can even lead to suicide when one is dashed against, but through these blows that the Swami was talking about and Vivekananda was talking about. When through these blows, they're not able to digest them. They fall into despair and self-loathing because they're not able to live up to their ideals in the face of these challenges. Swami Prabhavananda talks about this in some small detail in the book How to Know God, how dangerous this undigested spiritual knowledge is when it turns to spiritual pride, vanity. And so this is why Sri Krishna says, and it's said throughout all the scriptures, don't think that anything is yours. Did you create this universe? No, you project your own version of the universe, but you did not create this universe. You didn't create this incredible, complex, incredibly complex stardust spacesuit that is your garment to allow you to participate in this universe. So who did create this? Universe itself as the divine being. So surrender it all back. Give it all back. Give it all back. Offer it, as it was just said so beautifully. Anything else from anyone about this or anything else that we've read in this book?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Jeff.
I was really struck by the preceding paragraph, at least half of the preceding paragraph, which starts, when the separate I goes away completely, everything becomes God and nothing else remains. I'd like to hear a lot more about that.
Well, let me tell you what Swami Sridharananda told us. And he said this specifically to our congregation in a phone call. He gave this to us. And the phone call was recorded and played for the congregation. We start out with completely legitimately the idea, I am. We experience this, we believe this, we feel this, I am. Of course, it is a relative truth. It is a truth. As Swami Vivekananda says, we do not move from error to truth. We move, if you will, from lower truth to higher truth. So this I am is a truth. But as is pointed out so beautifully in this book, at some point, when this I am becomes fully developed, because to have any satisfaction in life, we need to develop this I amness that we're given. As the Swami says, develop it into strength and manliness and womanliness. But as we go along, Swami Sridharananda said, we get this intimation, this sense, well, wait a minute, there's something bigger than me. It may come, there's a talk given about this. I quote the experiences of two women who had a momentary experience that changed their entire lives because it changed their view. Their point of view, because there was no way not to. They couldn't avoid having this. They couldn't avoid digesting it because it was too powerful. But it may come to us in a more subtle form. But it's what the Swami called it. Sridharananda said we start off with I am, and we then sense I am and thou art. And as we go on, we understand, we come to understand, because now spiritual life begins, spiritual practice begins. We have to understand what it is that has been given to us. So we go on, and the Swami says, at some point, the reality becomes apparent to us that thou art comes first now. From I am and thou art, it's now thou art, and therefore I am. I exist because thou art. And then after a time, it becomes clear that really the only the highest reality that we can have as an experience is thou art. And it's no longer even a sense of as a part of this. And so the Swami didn't say it in this particular phone call where he made this syllogism, this development from I am to I am and thou art, and then thou art, and therefore I am, and then thou art. But in another context, it's brought to our attention that this is the entire goal, and it is this highest experience of this that leads us to this true self-surrender. I no longer am an individual in the sense that I thought I was. So all of the limitations, all of the upadhis, all the descriptions that I have of myself, I recognize are provisional and limitations, and therefore inherently false, because the truth of my being is unlimited, infinite, eternal. Does that help at all, Jeff?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
How could there be anything else?
Well, that's what arises in us. After a while, that question becomes absolutely the question to be answered through spiritual experience. How can there be anything else? As Vivekananda said, there is one existence. One existence. There cannot be two. You cannot be separate from this existence, even though it seems as if there are seven of us here this evening. Very well and good, so it seems. But we can practice something called satyagraha, insistence on the truth. We can insist to our mind, so it seems to you, this self that is ultimately surrendered. And it isn't that it's wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's not that it's bad. It's just not the highest truth. And as the Swami said, Vivekananda said, we do not move from error to truth. We move from the lower truth of a sense of separateness to the highest truth, the higher and then highest truth. Thou art, and therefore I am, and finally to thou art. And as Hanuman said to Rama, when Rama asked him, Hanuman, what do you think of me? Rama asked that question. Rama asked Hanuman, what do you think of me? And Hanuman said, well, when I'm in my ordinary waking consciousness, I am thy servant, and thou art my master. When I am in meditation, I see thou art the whole, and I am a part. When I rise to the highest level of realization, I see thou art, and thou and I are the same. Meister Eckhart said it this way: the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. And this is such a beautiful quote from Meister Eckhart, because this identity is expressed in this talking about vision. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I'm reminded of this humorous story that I heard in one of Swami Sarvapriyananda's talks
Oh, wonderful.
about this scientist who leaves the body and goes to the pearly gates,
Mm-hmm.
and he's met by God, and so he has to present his resume. And the scientist says, "Oh, I have this fantastic lab in which I have actually made a human being." So God says, "Oh, really? Oh, that's nice to hear. Can you tell me how you did that?" So the scientist says, "Yeah, so first I took a piece of earth." And God says, "Well, stop right there. First you create your own earth, then we will talk further."
Right. I heard this story in a somewhat a somewhat different context, in which somebody says, I can make a better universe than you did. I can make a better world than you have. He says this to God, and God says, well, fine, go right ahead. And the person says, well, first I'll need some dirt. And God says, get your own damn dirt. So it's the same story in just a somewhat more sanitized and developed idea, with the scientist having made a human being. Get your own damn dirt. Yes, where will we get our own dirt? Indeed, we didn't do this. It's not our dirt. Anything else? Thank you, Swami. That's a perfect story for this discussion. And it is the story of the two birds. Ultimately, the lower bird understands that he's nothing more than a shadow, a reflection of the true self. And so stops eating the bitter and sweet fruits, and stops receiving the blows of karma, and abides in his majestic, perfect self.
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I scribbled down the quote by Meister Eckhart. I love it so much. However, I noticed after I scribbled it down that the first part where he says, the eye with which I see God, I wrote that as the letter I. And then in the second part is the same eye in which God sees me. I wrote that EYE.
It's the same in both.
It works both ways, right?
Oh yes, it does indeed.
Which is the way that he wrote it or said it?
It was EYE in both instances.
Okay, great.
He meant he meant the physical eye and the spiritual eye beyond the physical eye. But he also spoke, because he was a full-out saint, realized soul, and mystic. He saw the reality with his physical eyes. You can, if you want to know more about Meister Eckhart, get the book Love Poems from God by Daniel, the interpretations of these great saints' poetry by Daniel Ladinsky, Ladinsky. Love Poems from God, and read the section on Meister Eckhart. You will be bowled over. This man was a child who, as a child, he spent much time in the forest, and came to learn from the forest the truth. and that's launched him on. And then later he became, oh well, I won't go into all of it, but you, if you want to know more about Meister Eckhart, there it is. He's really quite amazing.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Anything else from anyone?
Shall I read on?
Yeah. Read the last sentence or two, so you read into what's next.
Okay. Such spiritual digestion is the product of man's contact with the divine within himself or herself. In one of its many beautiful verses, the Srimad Bhagavatam reveals this sweet character fruit of divine grace. Conveying the words of Lord Vishnu to a devotee, it says, if birth, actions, youthful age, physical beauty, knowledge, power, etc., do not cause arrogance in anyone, know that that is a sign of my grace. I'm going to read that again. If birth, actions, youthful age, physical beauty, knowledge, power, etc., do not cause arrogance in anyone, know that that is a sign of my grace. Number 18, divine grace in the Indian tradition. In an oft-quoted verse in Viveka Chudamani, Shankaracharya expounds the most pervasive idea of divine grace. Three things are difficult to obtain, and if obtained, they are to be treated as the result of the grace of the divine. These are human birth, desire for spiritual emancipation, and guidance and help from a Mahapurusha or great man.
Please read that again, right from the start of 18, what he says. This is again 18. Notice it adds to 9. This is a seminal turning point in this book, because now he brings in just what he talks about here.
Divine grace in the Indian tradition. In an oft-quoted verse of the Viveka Chudamani, Shankaracharya expounds the most pervasive idea of divine grace. Three things are difficult to obtain, and if obtained, they are to be treated as the result of the grace of the divine. These are human birth, desire for spiritual emancipation, and guidance and help from a Mahapurusha or great man.
And it is when we realize these three graces, when we realize, this is when we realize, oh, thou art, and therefore I am. Through thy divine grace, I have now come to human birth and have this desire for emancipation or liberation, and have come in contact with this Mahapurusha, or great man. And these great men and women, if you poke them, these teachers, and most particularly the ones from the Ramakrishna lineage, I say that only because these are the ones that I know so well since 1973. If you poke them, they will say, I am no more, nothing more than the face of the divine. I am nothing more than the face of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. And that's what they will say, whether they're a monk or a nun, monks and nuns are just they're monastics. They have taken refuge. And so they now say so these Mahapurushas are great human beings. They will tell you because they have realized it. I am nothing more than a face of the divine person.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
so if someone has the first grace, which is the human birth, but don't appear to have the other two, will that come to them, like you said earlier, at some point something will make them seek or grow towards the other two?
Yes, exactly. And Sri Ramakrishna says it happens at exactly the right time. This is why we are not to judge anyone. If we weren't still ignorant, we would be illumined. Their ignorance is simply different than ours. We may have a higher level of ignorance, but we have to be very careful about thinking that way because it leads to pride. We're still ignorant. If we weren't ignorant, we would be illumined. So the second and perhaps even the third of those graces is manifested in these lives. Jai, 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 jai. Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. It has happened to me. Now that great ache that I have felt, that I tried to satisfy through the life of the senses, through this, through that, through the other thing, pursuing and pursuing and pursuing. That great ache that I was trying to ease, finally, I have the sense of where the ache comes from, this sense of separateness, and how to heal it. Find my way out of the separateness. Surrender this separateness. And this is why these Mahapurushas, these great women and men, come into our lives and offer us guidance, which is the word that the Swami uses. And it will happen, Sri Ramakrishna says, to everyone. And Vivekananda expounds this in great detail in his talks collected together as Jnana Yoga. And of course, we lament the state of the world. Of course we do. We lament the state of the world and the fact that it appears in us. And the more we pursue this spiritual life, the more sensitive we become, the more sensitive we become to the pain and anguish in the collective unconscious, all this separateness, all this sense of anguish because of terrible things happening, and not understanding it. So all of that, but what does it do? It drives us forward. These are the blows that Vivekananda talks about. When we feel these things, and we feel them intensely, when we feel these things, I just have to stick to my practice. I just have to do what I was told. And not be impatient with ourselves or with the world as best we can. And certainly not be impatient with others if we can forbear. As we heard when we studied Holy Mother's life last night, she said, contentment, titiksha, contentment and forbearance are the two greatest treasures of life. So yes, Swayam, it will come to each and every human being. Just when? Impossible to say. I mean, these two women whose stories I tell in that talk, neither of them was expecting this to happen. Neither of them had any idea that when that day began, that by the end of that day, they would have had an experience that would lead to their transformation, simply because it was unavoidable. You can go and listen to that talk. I forget the title of it. If anybody remembers, they can put it in the chat. But it's a powerful talk about two people who had very powerful experiences and what happened to them as a result. And these are people, this is not hearsay. Both of these people, one of them was my wife. So I really experienced that right up close and personal. But the other was very dear to us here. And she told me her story and even came and talked about it from the podium one Sunday. So yes, it will happen to each of us. How? And of course, we see people going through life and having experiences, and you know that comment by Winston Churchill continues to ring in our ears. Many people stumble over the truth and then get up and walk on as if nothing had happened. Well, Sri Ramakrishna says it's because it just isn't time yet. Thank you, Swami. Anything else from anyone? Okay, let's read on.
Can I say something?
Oh, please, dear.
About stumbling over the truth.
Yes.
It's easier to stumble over something if you're looking for it outside of yourself.
Exactly.
When you're looking inside, it's a lot harder to stumble over something.
Right. Well, what a wonderful thing to say, and what a good insight. Yes, we stumble over when we're looking outside because our thoughts are running ahead of our feet. Our thoughts are running ahead of we're hurrying toward something, we don't know what. We think we know, we think it'll be satisfying. So we're not aware of our feet. And so we stumble. We step on our own shoelaces. I've done it, both literally and metaphorically. So, yes, dear, when we look inside, it's harder to stumble over because it presents itself so differently. Any particular example you want to bring up in your own experience?
Well, the reason I was thinking about it is I was talking earlier this evening with my mom, my 88-year-old mama, about my brother, my only sibling, who's a year and a half older. And we are, in so many ways, we share a lot of things, but we also are opposites. He's very much outward oriented. Like everything is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's so busy running after all the things that are out there that he doesn't take any time to look inside, or very little.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of the opposite. I prefer to not really go anywhere except inside myself,
Mm-hmm.
which someone like my brother just doesn't really understand. He's like, he thinks that growing as a human being is all about experiences outside, traveling. You need to travel, you need to do this. And I'm not dismissing any of that. I agree that that's, a way to grow, but most of our cultures and societies stress the outer.
Mhm.
And if you are,
Almost exclusively.
yeah, and if you're a person who's more inward oriented, no one can see all your busyness,
Right.
they can't see how productive you're really being because you're not producing external things, but
Yes.
you may be producing or discovering or whatever, and have an incredibly rich life without appearing to lead anything other than a very mundane life.
Yes, Holy Mother was that way.
Yeah.
Holy Mother looked at most people looked at Holy Mother and said, "What's so special about her? You know, she's just she's just chopping vegetables and sweeping the courtyard and
Yeah.
you know cleaning up the leaf plates after people that she's fed, just
Mhm.
like all the other women around here.
Yeah.
What's up?" So yeah, and so we end up feeling like spiritual aspirants end up feeling like strangers in this society. And so this is why it's so dear that we have this congregation that allows us to be with one another of like mind, that we are in holy company by being with one another. And it is so sweet and reassuring. And, oh, I'm not crazy after all. Or if I am, I'm crazy along with all these other people. And as Sri Ramakrishna said, it's much better to be crazy for God. Be mad for God. You can be mad for name and fame and wealth and all those things, and it'll end up earning you nothing more than another lifetime where you get a chance to practice some more.
Cindy's comment reminded me of people that I've known who are, I would call them experience junkies.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to, after they've had a great experience, they've got to have another one.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as they're back home from vacation, they're already planning the next one.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
in escaping the rat race of the workday world with their vacation world, they're in another rat race just to do that.
Precisely. And it's very expensive to boot. So they have to make a lot of money to support it, which is a great burden.
And they're trying to fill a void inside themselves, but
Yes.
like we've already discussed, they don't know how to go inside to do that. So they're doing it the only way they know, or the way our culture has told them to do it.
Yeah. But as Christ said so explicitly, judge not lest ye be judged. They are simply, that's where they are. And it's painful to see them, particularly as Cindy pointed out, if we're related to them and love them dearly and feel their pain so intensely. I mean, I know Cindy well, and I know her relationship with her brother to some degree, and I know she feels his pain intensely, because he is getting older. He's losing his ability to be so busy and so distracted, because we all do as we get older, and it's very painful to him. And so somewhere in this book it's quoted, the old men chewing the cud of their past experiences. Ah, how sad. But we can say how sad, and at the same time, pray for them. Pray for every living being. May we all, yes, dear.
I was going to share, I mean, I so agree with, Cindy and Jeff. My own experience, growing up in India, we just didn't have the means to even seek, all these vacations and fancy things. Because I grew up in a not very wealthy family. So
Uh-huh.
the vacation was maybe every couple of years go to grandparents' house or something like that, and not every weekend going none of that.
Uh-huh.
We would just go out and play with friends in the park or something like that.
Hmm.
And then after coming here, I got sucked into that life of everybody saying, "Where are you going for your vacation?" So there was a time I was doing exactly the same thing. Would work, then there would be a long weekend. Oh, let's go somewhere, let's go somewhere. Then come back, wait for the next long weekend. But thankfully, because of being in the spiritual path, that seems to have automatically dropped. Now
Yes.
I do not have desire to go see the Eiffel Tower or whatever.
Yes.
It's just not appealing anymore.
This is what Sri Krishna says when you turn your face in the direction, in his direction, his capital H, meaning something beyond the person that was speaking the Gita. When you turn toward him, holiness itself shall transform you. These things do. As Swami Prabhavananda said, don't worry so much about all these things that you're seems to be so addicted to and so on. And he didn't mean real addiction. He just meant, you know, uh, you sense pleasures and this and that and the other thing. He said, you've seen the light in the east. So now you're living in the land of the West. You're living in the land of death and rebirth. All right. Just move toward that. Do what's necessary to move toward that light in the East, and you will automatically leave these things behind. Sure, some will try to stick to you, and you'll have to, so to speak, brush them aside by ignoring their attraction. But he said, just keep your eyes focused. Just keep your eyes focused on that bright light that you've seen in the East and just move toward it. And things, just as you just said, Swam, it happens spontaneously and automatically. These things just drop away. And it goes on until finally there are no limitations left to hold us, and we become kaivalya, independent of any limitation. Patanjali says, if you pursue this path and you pursue it sincerely, it will happen. At a certain point, something happens to you and you pass beyond limitation. Since it's 8:26, why don't you just read again what you just read, dear? And then we'll just leave it at that.
Sure. Number 18, Divine Grace in the Indian Tradition. In an oft quoted verse of the Vivek Chudamani, Shankaracharya expounds the most pervasive idea of divine grace. Three things are difficult to obtain, and if obtained, they are to be treated as the result of the grace of the divine. These are human birth, desire for spiritual emancipation, and guidance and help from a Mahapurusha or a great man.
Or a great woman. I say great woman. Who am I thinking of? Well, the one who immediately comes to mind is called Amma. She's this wonderful woman who's the hugging saint. She gives Shaktipat, in other words, a spiritual dose of Shakti through her embrace. And one of our dear devoted congregation, his name is Amadas, a servant of Amma. He is her disciple. And he is, he's really true. I mean, he does so much work for her whenever she's in the United States. He may travel many places to be of service to her and so on. So she's only one. There are many. There are not so many that are well known here in the West. But if you read that book, Love Poems from God, half of the saints that are quoted from in their poetry are women. Rabia, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Catherine of Siena, Mirabai. There are a couple of others, and I've forgotten who they are. But these great saints are there, and they can be great inspirations to us. These women Catholic saints were great inspirations to my late wife. Great inspirations to her. And you may have heard Sister Eleanor Francis when she came. As she actually spoke from here by Zoom. She actually was physically here because she was in town to visit her sister. And she gave us a presentation on Saint Teresa of Avila. I still have the little picture that she left on our shrine at the feet of Jesus. So with that, dears, we'll wrap it up and we'll start. Why don't we just start by reading again from the beginning of section 18 next week, dear, so that we read into what comes next.
Okay.
Any final thoughts or comments or questions from anyone? And all of you who did have something to say this evening, so beautiful to hear from you. And as I say over and over, it does not matter whether you share your thoughts with us the way those who speak up do. Your thoughts are felt because behind the relative truth of the seven of us, there's the one truth of only one. Only one. And that current flows through us all. So though three of us didn't say anything this evening, their thoughts were felt, their feelings, their perceptions, their knowledge was felt by us. That's Sangha, that's congregation, that's the one behind the appearance of many. Dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this your jungle world. Om, Amen. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we be always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So the next time we'll have a chance to gather is on Saturday to discuss Swami Prabhavananda's How to Know God, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as translated by and commented on by Swami Prabhavananda. And then on Sunday, I'm going to give my version of the talk on One Dreamer, Three Dreams. Gareth Young, the Buddhist priest, the Buddhist teacher who came and spoke to us this last Sunday, came for breakfast this morning. And we were together for 2 hours, and it was just wonderful. So he gave us his take on that idea last Sunday. I'll do it from a more deliberately Raja Yoga perspective on Sunday. Then that replaces the talk that would have been given. What is it we're trying to quiet? And so the following Sunday, we'll have an open forum on Raja Yoga. Any final thought or comment or question from anyone? All right, dears. As Jackie Gleason used to say, and away we go. Good night.